Hello, welcome to the Wildline podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today is going to be a weekend review. We will review the weekend of March 3rd through the 5th, a big weekend at the box office. I'm going to walk through the top 10, kind of riff a bit on each one. And maybe do like a deeper dive on Logan and some of the bigger new wide release openings. So let's get started. Number one this weekend was, of course, Logan. Opened on over 4,000 screens, so a super saturated opening. Per theater average was $21,000, which is fantastic. Its total gross for the weekend, and these are actuals, not just estimates. For the weekend, Logan did $88 million, $88.4 million to be exact. And I don't think this was a big surprise to a lot of people. I know the estimates were definitely, the projections from the industry were in the 60s. I remember seeing 65, 60 about, a month ago or even a couple of weeks ago. I think earlier last week, I should say, people began to understand that Logan was going to break out. Like, this wasn't just some fluke. This wasn't going to be, I guess the other like Wolverine movies opened pretty large, but there was something really special about this one, and the marketing was so incredible, honestly. Like, I'm not a huge comic book guy, and I say that a lot on this podcast. I'm kind of a comic book movie naysayer to some degree, and that's all right. There needs to be those people in the community. I'm just highly critical and skeptical because I grew up with all of these movies, and I've never been a huge fan of most of them. There's certainly ones that I think are fantastic in their own right, like Guardians of the Galaxy I loved. I'm trying to think of like other Marvel movies that I liked, but in any event, I saw the last Wolverine movie, the last couple of them, and I was like, this is not good. It's one thing when you have a good actor, you have explosive special effects that are interesting and rich and full, but when you don't have a good or decent story going on, and that not just like the dialogue and stuff, but like the holistic grand narrative of the movie, if it's not really well done, it sticks out to me like a sore thumb. And I think a lot of comic book movies are guilty of that, unfortunately. Look no further than Suicide Squad last year. It's a movie that was basically a complete mess. Got tons of buzz and did a lot at the box office, but it's not a good movie. And you could waterboard me, and I would never say that's a good movie. And I could say that about a lot more comic book movies. But what's happened recently and Deadpool changed the game. When Deadpool came out, was it last year? I guess it was last year. Something happened where the comic book genre, I think, made this leap forward. And I think it was a really needed leap forward, where that genre could be edgy again, could be experimental even, compared to, Fantastic Four or another Captain America Adventures film. Like, despite those being really fun popcorn movies, they didn't exactly speak artistically to most people. They're fun, interesting movies, but they're not engaging in a way that even a smarter action movie like the original John Wick was engaging. They just don't have it there. But Deadpool did, despite having or not being a very ambitious storyline in that film. The acting, the writing, the comedy was so well done, and it felt so fresh, and that very much connected with a huge group of people. That opened at $130 million that weekend. And I got this similar feeling when Logan was coming out. Now, it's not humor, not edgy humor, but sort of like very morose, almost existential sort of dread was in this one in the early trailers. And you're like, wow, this feels like intense and really dark. I don't know. It was especially the music. I think the Johnny Cash track Hurt, which I guess is a cover of Nine Inch Nails, which is crazy that even happened. The use of that was really good, and it felt, it just felt different, and it felt unique, and it felt like a comic book movie that was less on the cheesy, glitzy stuff and more on the emotions. Yes, emotions are real and they're important, especially when it comes to art. And I think a lot of comic book movies are missing real, true emotions, and maybe even emotional exploration, which is what most art is all about. I feel like Logan was showing that, especially in the marketing. Like, this isn't just another kind of throwaway comic book movie that you go and see and forget. There's some actual emotional narrative and maybe insight it's on display. And so I think that's why Logan has done so well, because it just felt so different. It felt like a little bit more of a grown-up comic book movie. But I think Fox is going to be super, super happy with these results. I'm gonna take a look. I think one thing else to note with Logan is the fact that it has done so well with the critics. 92% in Rotten Tomatoes, 94% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. That's one of the highest ones I've seen in a very long time. That's with like 49,000 reviews. This is already a beloved film by people. Cinema score A-, which is very good for a comic book movie. Ironically, The Shack got an A. That's insane. What is wrong with people? Metacritic score was 77 for Logan. So this one's going to stick around for a long time. 88 million this weekend. This upcoming weekend, I can't see it dropping. If it drops like 40%, that would be, I think, about right. Maybe 44. I would say mid 40s would probably be really good for this. It might be even less. You never know, because of the quality of the film, how much people have clearly liked it. This could stick around for a very long time. It does have Kong opening up this weekend, so there will be a very busy box office going on, but I feel like the quality of Logan's just going to sort of win out here. So 88 this weekend, it's at least going to do probably 50 next weekend, hopefully. So a huge win for Hugh Jackman and for Fox and for the whole X-Men series. It's interesting when thinking about the X-Men series. It's like you have these two sort of offshoot movies that have really crushed it. Logan now and Deadpool last year. The X-Men movie last year did not do well, and I would call it a flop. So it's fascinating that these single movie characters from the X-Men universe are doing quite well, but the ensemble movies are just sort of crashing and burning. So it'll be interesting to see if they... I thought Gambit was supposed to come out last year. There was all this Channing Tatum. What is his name? Channing Tatum? What the fuck? I don't fucking know his name. I can't speak. Anyways, he's supposed to be in Gambit. That was supposed to come out last year. But I feel like now, and I haven't checked on that recently, if I'm at Fox, I'm thinking, yeah, greenlight that now. Let's get this solo character movie out there because they're doing so well. Let's make it R. That's another big thing to note about Logan. It's an R-rated movie along with Deadpool. Make it R, get that audience in the book. It's like the Comic-Con audience. The Comic-Con audience is actually older than what you think. I'm 30, in my mid 30s now. These are people my age going to see this movie. Like, it's not just like 15-year-olds and like 17-year-olds. It's like there's a whole group of nerdy millennials that grew up just as geeks, and they're never going to not be geeks. And so I don't know. Like, I always theorized that the comic book movie craze would eventually come to an end, but I don't know, man. I don't anymore. I can't really see it anymore. Like, it just keeps winning and winning. And you got Guardians of the Galaxy coming out in like a couple of months. I don't know. And then that's going to do like what, $400 million domestically. So I think comic book movies are just going to keep winning. And Logan is a part of that whole winning crop of films that is coming out. So that was number one this weekend, 88.4 million. Number two this weekend, huge story. The horror film Get Out did $28.2 million. It added about 150 screens. Its per theater average was just about $9,600. Its total take so far is $78 million. Now, I talked about this a little bit in the last podcast. Huge win for them. It was number one last weekend. The actuals jumped like $3 million. It was insane. There's something special about this film, and here's why. Obviously, the topic of the film, race relations, black boyfriend with a white girlfriend, going back to the white girlfriend's home. It turns into a sort of an absurdist sort of horror film. Horror is always a good way to explore social criticism or social ills or social fear that people are having in a certain time point. Look at something like, especially the Dead films, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and even Day of the Dead were like political. They were polemics, essentially. If you got past the gore and looked into what the story was about and what the characters were doing and what the situation was, George Romero was hyper political, using the horror film genre, and we're seeing that sort of come back a little bit more. We're getting away from a lot of the paranormal activities, even the better films recently, like The Conjuring, Insidious, the whole Blumhouse sort of movement. They're not very political at all. Purge is kind of the exception, I think, to that whole world. But now we're seeing something like Get Out, and it kind of feels like we're back in like a really vibrant horror renaissance or something. It Follows, The Witch, and now Get Out. Like, there's something happening with American horror films, and it's really exciting. I'm a huge horror fan, so I really got to see this movie. But in any event, the story here isn't necessarily the fact that it did $28 million this weekend. It's the fact that it only dropped 15% from its opening weekend. That is like hard to describe how crazy awesome that is. Horror films in general pop off their first weekend and then quickly collapse their second weekend. You usually see a drop of about, if a normal movie drops about, let's say, high 40s, low 50s, horror films are usually high 50s, low 60s, even higher, sometimes in the 70s, sometimes almost getting close to 80. That's a huge drop. It's just the nature of horror films and how they work. And usually that's the case because horror films, for whatever reason, attract a large amount of buzz and hype. People go and see it, and usually they're let down by them because horror films, for the most part, offer a lot of cheap thrills, but they sort of lack in acting and writing and craftsmanship. They're super low budget. They're just not well done overall. And I say that as a fan of the genre. It's a very schlocky genre. Because they don't really, a studio's not going to give a horror movie, a $60 million budget. It's just not going to happen. They're little bets, essentially. And Get Out was only made for $4.5 million, but the fact that it is doing so well, it's already at $78 million. Like, if it breaks, when it breaks the $100 million mark for a horror film, that's a really big deal. And it's going to go way past that. I mean, you're looking at maybe even 140, 150 total. If it keeps going like this, that's a huge story. I mean, it's a bigger story than even Hidden Figures, which is sort of the movie I've been going on and on about. It's still in the top 10. That's at 158 so far. I'll just be fascinated to see where this one goes. To me, this might be the story of 2017 so far, is the kind of amazing performance of Get Out. I kind of wonder what it is about that film. Is it the race relations part of it? Is that people just want to go see it and sort of like, find a way to sort of experience their fear about what's going on, about the social unrest that's happening now? I mean, the social unrest that's happening now is not that bad compared to like even the 70s or the 60s. Like, it's like a Tea Party now, not to get that political, but whatever, you know what I mean? It's pretty calm to compare to what it was 40, 50 years ago, but there is this incessant sort of fear mongering. I don't want to say on both sides, but one side's obviously much worse than the other. But maybe Get Out as a way for people to feel safe and experience those emotions and maybe process them in a different way. I could go down a whole psychoanalytic line with that, but I'm not going to. In any event, Get Out, coming number 2, $28.2 million with a great performance. Number 3 this weekend was The Shack. This is, I guess, a Christian book, based on a Christian book. Did $16 million this weekend. A very respectable 5,600 per theater average. That's a great performance, I think, for this movie. It's interesting because it got a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes. The critics absolutely savaged it. The trailer was horrendous. It just looked it made no sense, the trailer. I mean, I'm sure if you know the book, it makes sense to you, but just watching that trailer, you're like, wait, what the fuck is this? This makes I don't even understand what's happening in the trailer. Like, how am I going to understand what's happening in the movie? It's crazy. This is one of those, I think it's maybe just the Christian audience, nothing against Christians, but they tend to go to these movies and just love them because they have a really good pro-Christian values message to them. 15% on Rotten Tomatoes, but 87% liked it audience score. And I'll also say the cinema score is an A. Like, that to me is worthy of an entire paper. An entire thesis should be written about this, because I'm sure if you look at other very pro-Christian films or Christian values films, I think you're going to see a very similar pattern. Critics savage them because they're art critics and they're interested in things like emotional narrative and editing and cinematography and acting and writing, the elements of filmmaking. The people who go to these movies honestly don't give a flying fuck about that stuff. They just want to be entertained. They want to, be engaged in the story, and they want their values to be mirrored in the actual film. And I think The Shack hit a home run with that. So then it did pretty well. There's always that market out there. If you look at the stats about, especially in America, I think less so in Canada. Everything we're talking about now is domestic, so it's America and Canada in terms of the numbers. But if you look at specifically American, the religious breakdown, there is a huge amount of fundamentalist Christians, and I wish I could figure out how many there are. I'll look it up real quick. There's just a large population of people who are very religious, and that is a market to tap into. It's just another demo if you think about it. Just like there's an African American audience for films, there is a Latino audience for films in America, and so it's just one of those specialty genres. Like, I'm thinking of like the leftover films, but what's ironic about the Christian sort of genre and demo is that it tends to be critically maligned more than any other genre, I would say. There is about 25% of the U.S. population is evangelical. If you look at all Christian, you're talking like about well over 50%, probably about 60% of people in the United States or more, a little bit more than that, are Christian. So that's a huge market, but something like The Shack is more towards, I think, more fundamentalists who are very into their religion. But whatever, throw that out the window. The Shack did great this weekend. It's a great per theater average of $5,600. Didn't see that coming. Thought it would be lower than that. Number 4 this weekend, the Lego Batman movie, $11.7 million. Nice 39% drop. That's a nice, good children's movie type drop. Lost 400 screens. Its per theater average is still north of $3,000, sitting at $3,200. Its take so far is about $150 million. I definitely think when you look at this at the end of the day, it underperformed. I think combining the Lego brand with the Batman brand, I think they thought I was going to do probably 20 to 30% better than this, but I think they're going to be like, okay, this did all right. I don't think they're going to greenlight any more sort of Lego offshoot movies. I could be wrong about that, but I don't see that happening with this performance. There's too much money sunk into marketing and stuff, and the return on this is going to be okay, but it's not going to be great. So number 4 was Lego Batman movie. John Wick Chapter 2 coming at number 5, 4.8 million. An okay 48% drop. Starting to lose a lot of screens. Lost 480 screens. It's in its 4th weekend. Per theater average just sunk below $2,000 at $1,941. Total gross so far is $82 million. Big win for John Wick overall. I thought it would do a little bit better than this, maybe like 10%, 20% better than this in the long run. But I think people really like the film. And I do think they're absolutely going to greenlight a third one. You have to. I mean, I saw this one. I love the first one. I think the first one is like an instant action movie classic. It's just like an instant classic when you see it. Like, that's amazing. Everything about that was awesome. The second one is your typical sequel to an action movie, very successful action movie. Kind of reminds me of Die Hard 2. There's a lot more going on. It's a lot bigger, a lot bolder, but it certainly lost some of the magic of the original. I don't think this is going to be a movie that people are going to go back and watch a lot, to be honest with you. The first one they will. The first one's going to be a huge hit for, the next 30, 40 years. I don't think the second one's going to go down like that. Pretty cool movie, but just quality-wise did not have the spark of the original. Before I Fall, Open Roads Films, these guys kind of like are very, very hit and miss with their releasing. They came in at 4.69 million for the weekend, 2,346 screens, which is a pretty decent opening for a movie like this. Usually those guys go a little bit smaller than this. I don't even know what this movie's about. I have to look this up. Before I Fall, I have no clue. I've never even heard of this. How did I miss this movie? I'm like such a movie nerd. It got an okay rating on Rotten Tomatoes. God, how did I have no idea what the hell this is? PG-13? Who knows? 67% Rotten Tomatoes, 69% score on the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Cinema score is a B. People thought it was okay. Metacritic, 58%. I can't believe, I feel like I just totally missed this. Like, what the hell is this movie about? Someone has to tell me. Before I Fall? What? I thought this was like the movie about like the girl who like this goddamn movie. Fuck this movie. I saw the trailer to this like 10,000 times for some reason, and I guess it's a fascinating premise. It's basically it's a takeoff of Groundhog Day. Like, somebody's trapped in the same day over and over and over again. I guess it's based on a young adult novel, but it's like, I don't know, this should be doing a lot better than what it's doing. Like, $5 million for a movie like this, like, that's hard to like put into context. But when you look at the $2,000 per theater average, like, this is just not good. Like, you got to do something better than this. And I think it's Open Road Films just doesn't know how to promote films or whatever. They just have been notorious for being bad. I don't even want to talk about this movie anymore. Saw the trailer way too many times. Number 7, Hidden Figures, $3.8 million. 34% drop. Its drops are finally coming back down to earth, but not even really. Like, a 34% drop in its 11th weekend is great. It's sitting at $158 million so far. Huge win. I've talked about it incessantly on this show, but a great showing for Hidden Figures this weekend. Number 8 was The Great Wall, $3.6 million. 60% drop. Awful. It lost probably because it lost 1,000 screens this weekend. Per theater average is sitting about 1,600. Its total take so far is $41 million. Keep in mind the production budget on The Great Wall was north of $150 million. The last article I saw for it, I believe it was Hollywood Reporter, said at least a $70 million loss. I'd put it more over $100 million based on my calculations, but I'm not an expert or an insider. It just doesn't make any sense how they're making those calculations, especially because a lot of that box office is coming from China. I guess they probably got a better slice than a normal Chinese release because it was co-financed by a Chinese company. But it's a huge flop and a big disaster. And sort of a failed experiment, co-financing between an American company and a Chinese company. But whatever, shit happens. Great Wall's big flop. Number 9, it's still sticking around, 50 Shades Darker. 3.5 million, 54% drop. It seems pretty normal. It's only its 4th weekend. Lost 1,000 screens. Oh, this one's sinking real quick. $1,600 per theater average. It's sitting at about $110 million. I guess they're gonna be okay with that. I don't know, man. Like, $55 million production budget, double that, I think, for marketing. You're talking at least $50-$60 million just domestically. Worldwide, probably, I don't know, 180 million, $90 million. I don't know. That one's going to be tough. I think it's obviously, I think it's still going to turn an okay profit, but I think Universal wanted this to do a lot better than it's doing. Keep in mind, it's sitting at $109 million right now. The original opened at 85, I believe. That's opening weekend. Number 10 this weekend was La La Land, the best picture ? $3 million this weekend, 36% drop. Still on 1,400 screens, pretty good. They popped it up, I think, a bit for the Oscars. Still north of $2,000 per theater average. That's pretty good. $145 million total take so far. Got snubbed for Best Picture by Moonlight. That was just the most awkward situation ever. I feel bad for everybody involved, especially the Moonlight people. So that's the top 10. Fist Fight fell at top 10. What a awful performance from that movie. I hear it's just an absolute train wreck. I will mention that Moonlight did add about 1,000 screens. And this is a whole fascinating story that I don't want to go into too much, but I tracked Moonlight pretty closely this last fall as it was going on, and I really hyped the film up a lot, and I finally got a chance to see it, and it's going to be one of my favorite films of all time. I can just, it is right now, and it's such a beautiful film, and it's so well done, but it is not for mass audiences. I think even like my family asked about it, like, oh, what do you think about, what's the best movie you've seen this year? And I'll say Moonlight, and I'm like, don't see it. And the reason I say that, and I bring that up, because they expanded this thing to 1,500 screens, and its per theater average is shitty. 1,400 per theater this weekend, only $2.3 million. And this movie capped out at $25 million total take. This is not a mass market film. Moonlight is an art film. It is for people who like art films. It's experimental in a whole variety of ways. And throw out the fact that the main character is African American. Throw out the fact that he is gay. Just throw all that stuff out, because I think a lot of times when people saw the byline to this movie or like heard about it, like, oh, it's the guy, it's the movie about the gay black guy, and I'm like, yeah, sure. And that makes it interesting, but the real achievement of the film isn't sort of political statement or some political protest. It is really one of the better art films that I have seen in a very, very long time. Nothing I've seen this year really comes close. The other thing that I can think of is The Witch, which was a horror film thriller type thing, but very, very well done. But Moonlight just was a special piece of art, and I just don't think it'll ever play to most people in the mass market, and I don't think it was ever meant to. That was kind of the point. The point was that it was a very idiosyncratic but honest, truthful depiction of a young gay black man growing up in Miami. And I found it to be incredible. The storytelling was just wonderful. But what's interesting about that, and the reason I'm talking about this at length, I said I wouldn't, which is what I always do. I always go on little rants about things I shouldn't. Is the fact that there is an art house audience in the United States and in Canada. It is centered around certain places, and these films like Moonlight will do well there, but they absolutely will not play outside of those places. And if you've lived a lot in this country, you've lived in big cities, you lived in suburbs, and you lived maybe out in a rural area, you will understand why. Like, Moonlight will play well in a place like Los Angeles, let's say, or Miami. But if you go 2 hours outside of that city, it's probably not going to play very well. And the further you get out, the less well it's going to play, just because of the content and the story. And so, there's a reason why a movie like Moonlight probably was made for, or $5 million or something like that, $10 million, because there's even the fact that it won an Oscar, it's still not going to break the $30 million mark. That's outrageous when you think about it. It can't even make $30 million at the box office. Now, sure, look, maybe DVD, streaming, all this other stuff, but it's not a huge moneymaker, and it's never going to be. I'm looking at it, it's at $25 million. Fist Fight, which is a terrible film, is at $28 million. A terrible, awful piece of trash movie that isn't worth, the bits that it takes up on the USB stick you stick into the projector, versus like Moonlight, which is really a work of art. The fact that Fist Fight makes more money is one of the most intriguing things about the box office and the film industry in general, is that quality does not always equal money, right? And quality doesn't always make the product great at the end of the day if you view them as a product. Moonlight has capped out what it could possibly make. It couldn't ever make any more than it's making right now. This is the best possible scenario for that product. Fist Fight could have made a lot more money if it was decent. If you added some quality to Fist Fight, it could have made $100 million easily. But that's just the way this market works and how the business works. And I think, as someone who, I love the analytics side and I love the business side of the movie business and the movie industry and the entertainment industry in general, it does frustrate me, from somebody who comes from a more artistic background, especially the art criticism background, to see that happen. Right. And it's frustrating to see a movie like Moonlight that is so good can't beat a shit movie like Fist Fight. It's just like, from a business perspective. But anyway, end rant. Okay, I'm done ranting. The only thing I want to talk about is Split's still doing well, $134 million so far. The other movie that came out this weekend that nobody knew about, I don't understand what happened with this movie. The movie's called Table 19. Anna Kendrick, Stephen Merchant, Craig Robinson. Like a little romantic comedy about going to a wedding, and you're assigned to the wedding table where it's all single people. I think the whole gist of it is that, like, these people were supposed to RSVP no. The only reason they were invited is sort of just a gesture, and they weren't supposed to say yes, but they all did and didn't know they were supposed to say no. It ends up, kind of a light romantic comedy with Anna Kendrick as the lead. It opened on 9,000 screens, 900 screens. Only did 1,800 per theater, 1.6 million total. I don't get this film. It's Fox Searchlight. This should have been pumped out to at least 3,000 theaters. It should have been a big, huge release. It looks okay. I mean, it looks really charming, to be honest with you, which is why I think they should have marketed this a lot more and then a much wider release. But they didn't. It's really a mystery to me because you got Anna Kendrick in the lead. I guess maybe the quality of the film was so poor that they didn't want to push it out that much. It wasn't even given a cinema score, if that gives you any idea of, how little this thing was promoted. I can't even find the score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got to be somewhere. Where is it? I don't know what happened with this. It just feels like a lost opportunity by Fox Searchlight to put out a really kind of smaller indie type film, but push it out a lot more. Ooh, 19% on Rotten Tomatoes. Ouch. 53% on audience score. Oh, that sucks. I know what happened. They probably saw the early cut and said it was terrible. Thought it was terrible. PG-13. This is the guy that did Spellbound, the guy that did Rocket Science, which I'm not a huge fan of these movies. But anyway, 19% on Tomatoes. Terrible. Oh, so bad. So bad. In any event, it just seemed like, you know what, though? People don't know that going into opening weekend. I think, they could have easily tripled. They could have made a lot more money on this film. There's no reason this doesn't make $10 million this weekend if you push it out wide. But anyway, that's all I got for this weekend. I'll be back next week. I'm not doing the projection shows anymore just because it's too much to take right now. My life is a little bit too busy to do 2 shows a week, but I'll keep doing 1 a week and do the review. I'll just mention what's coming out next weekend. Kong Skull Island is the big wide release. I think it's going to be... I think Kong's going to win number 1. I have no clue what it's going to do. I'm thinking 65, 70-ish. And I think Logan will be right behind it on its second weekend. But I think that's going to win out the week. And that's the only wide release this weekend coming up. And then we got a busy one the week after. You got Beauty and the Beast and the Belko Experiment. So it's pretty busy. Pretty busy here on out through summer, it looks like. It feels like The summer box office starts in March now, which is just it's weird. I think it's everything has shifted forward a bit, but now the end of August and September are a complete ghost land. Hey, man, thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wildline podcast. I'll be back next week. Take care.